If there's anything you would like to say to our class before we begin with some questions from me, and then we're going to open it up also to questions from the audience. But before we start, is there anything in particular that you would like to say to the students before we begin?
Just am super happy to be here. And I really appreciate you guys taking the time to pick our brains, and hopefully we can answer some questions and help you get a little better sense of the road ahead. These were always the most beneficial chats for me, to talk to younger alumni and figure out what the next step was. And so hopefully you have the same thing that I got from my peers that had come in at some point and talked to me when I was a student. So.
Anything you'd like to add, Shaniece?
I definitely agree with her, and I feel the same way. Like, the Temple talks, the gatherings of the alumni, when I was in school, it was beneficial to me, and it made me feel like I wasn't going to be alone in this industry. Temple is really running the industry. Like, it doesn't matter where you are, like, you're going to run into a Temple person, and that's what makes me so happy. Like, we feel like sometimes when we're going to a new city or whatever, we're alone, but really we have family everywhere because of Temple.
Wonderful view toward it. I think that your insights are going to really provide the students with some really meaningful takeaways and lessons about what it's like out there. Let's talk about lessons for a second, if we could begin. So looking back at your time at Klein, you graduated less than 20 years ago, less than 10 years ago. I graduated college about 40 years ago. So times have changed compared to when I graduated college. Looking back at the less than 10 years that it has been since you graduated, what lessons have you learned since graduation, particularly related to Klein, that you would be willing to share?
That my professors were correct on a lot of things. I will never forget, I had a class with Shaniece James, who is an incredible woman and one of the most meaningful people in my life. And I just got a chance to tell her that recently. But I remember we were sitting in class and everyone was stepping on eggshells to try to give criticism. And she slammed her stuff down and she's like, listen, enough here. If you cannot take criticism in this course, how are you going to go into a newsroom and take criticism from your news director? And they're not just going to give you a bad grade or, give you positive feedback. They'll fire you. So you need to get it together now and learn how to take constructive criticism. Because when you're out in the real world, it is not that coddly, handholdy type of positivity that you guys are trying to give each other. Be honest here, because between your bosses and the viewer comments that come through, you need to learn how to take, some very serious criticism. And the older I got and the more I matured in the industry, she was absolutely correct. But just between people like Shaniece James and Matt Fine and all of my professors just really laying a very solid foundation for me, I think the foundation I got at Temple is the reason why I am where I am today so quickly. So listen to your professors. They know more than you might think they do.
Can I go with that? Because some students think I'm the devil because I'm excessively blunt with them.
No, oh my goodness. Wait till you get a viewer email and they just rip your outfit, your hair, call you names, all sorts of stuff. Viewers are great.
So and looking at the action is looking back, are there any particular lessons from class or conversations or anything that stood out that you recall from your lessons from Klein?
Yes. Overall, what I loved about being at that school is that they made it okay and encouraged us to not keep ourselves in a box, to explore other options, because sometimes, like, especially when I first started out, I was like, okay, I just got to focus on one thing. And then as I, got to my junior and senior year, they were like, no, try your hand at this. And then I did like TUTV and Temple Update and stuff like that. And, really learned all the areas of, working in television, because then it made me a better person on camera, in any position that I got after that. And then also, my teachers like Paul Gluck and Amy Caples and Peter Jeroff, when I would do stories with them, at first I always like pitch stories that I thought they wanted to hear or that would be the ideal situation. And then what, especially Amy, they were kind of like, pitch what you like, pitch something that you get, fulfilled from. And so then I kept thinking about that. And even now, especially at Access, anything that is on air, like if you watch it, you'll be like, oh yeah, if it's 80s or 90s or superheroes, that's definitely Shaniece. And so, everything, or people of color. So it's like, I am happy that I, kept that as a reminder to stay true to myself no matter what, and to pitch things that, are a reflection of me that I love and that makes me happy, because it gave me the greatest opportunities when I just stayed true to myself and not kept myself in the box as well.
I'm going to segue into something that both of you just said, because it sounds so important that essentially it's A, get used to being critiqued, and B, get used to the fact that you have a voice. Don't try to figure out your professor's voice. Find your voice and realize that along the way, you're probably going to get pushback on that. You're probably going to have someone say like, okay, I don't know what you're going with here, but there's one thing that's certain is you're not going to know what's my voice inside my head. And trying to have students like figure out like, what do they want, which is probably some of my students know the worst thing I think you can ask. What we want is for you to tell us what you want and to really drive that point home and to own it. And yeah, that means that if you get critiqued on it, at least you owned it. Mm-hmm. I think that's a really, really valid point. And to say like finding that voice somewhere. I want to talk about ownership because I love the topic. And I don't think in academia we do enough of this, which is self-reflection. It's a lot of create. Oh, by the way, when you're done creating, here, create something else. And then try to figure out with this lovely rubric what I want you to create. And then, oh, did I tell you you got to create something else? And it's this constant feeling of create all the time and not think and reflect all the time. And try to say like, I was at point A, now and then I went to point B, and God knows point C sucked. And then I went to point D, and now I'm at whatever, fill in the letter. Looking back, there are going to obviously be some failures, but there's also going to be some successes that really stand out in your career. Now, these could be the things that you reflect on for yourself, or they could be the things that you tell other people about. Looking back at your career so far, there's going to be something of which you're particularly proud of. If you had to select, let's say one, maybe even two, what is something or some things that you look back on and you reflect on and say that is something I am incredibly proud of doing? As we started last time with Breland, Shaniece, would you be willing to start off in reflection of that question?
So I, before I was at Access and Steve, I was at E-News, and I went in and there wasn't a lot of people of color. And then the one person of color that was there, she was like, hey, just so you know, don't pitch Black stories at the news meetings. And I was like, oh, and then this come from them. So I'm like, oh, okay. And then she was like, yeah, because they're never going to pass it. Like, it's not going to, whatever. And so I was like, okay. And so, the first week that I was there, I was listening to the types of stories and all of that. And I'm just like, there is a void. Like, why are we not talk like other than like Beyonce or, Will or whatever at the time, like they really skated past, focusing on people of color. And so then the second week I was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna pitch and see what happens. And at the time it was like some type of anniversary with Biggie Smalls or what have you. And so I pitched it and they put it on the board. They were like, oh, okay, blah, 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 because I, did a research in the vault and we had, stuff to support the story. And after I pitched it, the girl that told me don't pitch, she like gave me a funny look. And then after that, they were like, okay, Shaniece, you got any pitches? And so maybe what I think is like, she tried to pitch and they shut her down. And so she was like, oh, I'm not. And so she didn't want me, another person of color, to like, get praised or, get their stuff on the air. And so I'm just happy that I didn't allow her, because she was there longer than me. I'm glad I didn't allow her to prevent me from speaking up and speaking how I feel and what I feel as though it needs to be, shown, because, we are a huge platform, or, they were a huge platform. And it's like, why are we not, utilizing this to make sure that everybody is getting seen, and so I did notice there are a lot of gatekeepers in this industry, and some of the times I think it's like they're gatekeepers because something didn't work out for them. Like they tried to do something and they don't want somebody else to try to do what they did, or they might feel jealous. And it's like, no, like if you feel it in your heart that you think that something is supposed to be on, or you want that change, say it, pitch it. Otherwise, how will you know if it's going to be put on air or if they're going to say yes? So then I kept that mentality, throughout ever since then. But yeah, like I could have easily, melted down when she said that, but I was just like, no, let me try and see what happens. And then it ended up being fine. So
that's excellent. And what a shocking statement to say, don't pitch your own voice about something that you feel strongly about. I mean, that to me is, well, you proved her wrong. And that's absolutely, utterly brilliant, and learned a great deal in the process.
And then one more thing to add. So E was just a horrible job. Anyway, so they also didn't like that because they will always be like, why are you so colorful? Or because I like 80s and 90s clothes. And I'm just like, what? And I'll be the brightest person in the room or whatever. But my mindset was, I work in TV. Like I'm dressing how I feel. We should look presentable. And so because I was doing that, the higher ups were like, oh, let's put Shaniece out on the carpet. Like, so they were seeing me as a talent. And so those girls that were like, oh, why are you dressed in like, 80s or blah, blah, blah. And then they saw me on the carpet and they're like, oh, wow, so Shaniece gets to go on the carpet, but we've been here for 2 years and blah, blah, blah. So they were really trying to not make me seen. And I did a lot of...
It's one that lived through the 80s and 90s and recalls it very distinctly. I can remember the bright neon color. I've got to see your nails, because if I remember these,
I need to take them off, but I just did the Nickelodeon Kids Choice Awards, and these were slime. That's the other thing too. Like, I'm just myself. I'm happy to be myself, and they like it.
I love it. That's absolutely, utterly brilliant, and great choices, definitely, for expressing your colorful personality in so many ways. That's brilliant. It's brilliant. Looking back, Breland, what would you say is something you're proud of?
Getting here to Philadelphia, honestly, I thought this was a pipe dream, and I only ever told my mom, I said, how cool would it be if I got to Philadelphia and was able to work in the sports market by 30. I did not think this was possible. If anybody pays attention to the local news, you know that people come here and they just don't leave. And I never even thought a job would be open, let alone that they would consider me at this age, because people just have so much more experience here. And when I got the job, I genuinely couldn't believe it. And then I very distinctly remember, it might have been Denise James as well, reaching out and saying, you just made history, right? I said, what do you mean? She said, to the best of my knowledge, there has never been a Black woman to anchor sports in one of the major 4 stations here until you today. And I was like, what? It's 2021. I did not think that was something that I was capable of breaking, a barrier in 2021. But here I was, and I was like, wow, I just thought I was pulling something off that was a pipe dream for myself. And then it turns out that no one that has ever looked like me has been in this position before. And so, and you can tell, I mean, walking into media rooms for the Phillies and the Eagles, and you look around, and one of these things is not like the other one in both sectors, being a woman. And I mean, there's about 2 of us who show up to Eagles on a daily basis, me and Jamie Apodi. And I'm the only woman of color there usually. So it's just, I think that is the coolest thing.
I have to stop there, because I have to give the students a second just to share the love for how absolutely, utterly incredible it is to see 2 women who are also people of color, who are breaking barriers and getting voice out and getting representation out. All of us that have studied media know that representation matters. It matters in terms of of not just how viewers feel about the news, it matters also in how the viewers feel about themselves. So I just want to throw it out to the students right now and just say, putting something in the chat on the importance of that representation and having such positive female role models in these industries, particularly women of color. I just say, share the love, students, because you all know the important power of having representation, and having someone break through those barriers, because to be the first to do that is incredible. To find your voice in an industry where someone says you don't have a voice here, or worse, I don't know what's worse, to tell someone you don't have a voice here, you will never have a voice here, or your voice is not important here and should be just utterly silenced. I don't know which of the above, because they all kind of suck. I mean, so I don't know which is the worst, but how absolutely wonderfully groundbreaking it is to see your work is an inspiration. The program that I direct is probably primarily female, and is proudly doing as much work as possible on DEI initiatives and trying to be as inclusive as possible in raising voices. My particular area, which I've talked about a little bit in the past, is an LGBTQ outreach and inclusion, but seeing how much you've done in breaking down barriers related to opposition in the world is absolutely incredible. So congratulations, it truly is an inspiration. Leading to that, our next fun question to go to both of you, whoever would like to address it. You somewhat suggest it. DEI initiatives right now are difficult. We are in a complex world. To report on some of the efforts of the news, it's frightening. Voice being taken away with new voting measures, attacks. You see that it's 2022, but sometimes it feels like it's, oh, so 1957. I mean, there's just so much going on, and we need to look at aspects of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And looking at your role and your company's role concerning social justice, how do you think companies can be held accountable, but also looking at public facing companies and also looking at students' roles? What can we do? We want to create an inclusive place. We want to have companies that are also inclusive. What advice would you give students in those regards? Because you are both such inspirational women. And what advice would you give to people in regard to diversity and inclusion?
That's tough. I think especially in television, it's a very, very fine line, right? Because your face and your presence is a reflection of the company. Now, Fox 29 has done an incredible job with their diversity initiatives. I don't know if anyone has caught it, but very frequently throughout the course of the month, they air our race reality specials. And it's all of us. It's a collaborative effort of just spotlighting different inequalities and ways that we can change things and make it better. And they do a ton of different, it's not just race relations, but we have Save Our Streets, of the gun violence. And there's so many different initiatives that we're doing there. And I think Fox 29 is really trying to make a difference in our community in our part. But other corporations, I gotta be honest, other places that I've worked are not that way at all. Looking at you, Kansas City.
Oh yes.
Kansas City was really challenging, especially being East Coast mindset and not dealing with that ever. That is a whole nother bag of racism you got going on there. That is something else. But it's really difficult to hold your employer accountable. But I think just doing your part of, however small it is, pitching stories, doing stories, trying to give a voice to people who might not be in their usual demographic. I would always ask my last station, you say we stand for you. Who is the you? Because I see you all the time out in the suburbs, but never on 18th and Vine in Kansas
Mhm.
City, like after, you know, past truce, y'all don't want to go out there. So who is the you? And just asking those questions and kind of pitching stories that's off the beaten path of other people who might have blinders on to certain things, I think is a big help, because it just opens up another viewpoint. So just kind of being where your feet are, doing the absolute best you can without, of course, getting fired, is the best advice that I can give.
I agree with her too as well. And also, you know, looking at, okay, what can I do if they're not doing their job? And, you know, in my regard too, it's like pitching stories. Like, you know, NBC, they have a bunch of programs like for diversity, inclusivity, and all of that. And something that I noticed is like during the Black Lives Matter stuff, you know, they were really adamant about, you know, making sure we had all the coverage and this and that. And then maybe like a couple months later, it started to fizzle. They started to go back into what they were doing before. And, you know, like even when I got this job at Access, I was like, I'm on assignment here. There's a purpose and a reason why I'm here. And, you know, I quickly found out it's to be that voice and to make sure that they're, you know, highlighting the people that are often overlooked. And so when I started to see that they were shifting away from what they were doing, I was like, hey guys, we gotta get back on this horse. Okay, so we're gonna do this, this, and this. And then like there was one day where I was pitching so many like, you know, people of color that the whole episode was all Black people. And I don't think they realized it, because I was just pitching. I said, we gotta get back on track. We can't say, oh, we're this, we're that, if we're not doing what we say we're gonna do. So, but yeah, definitely looking at what you can do to make sure that we're still on track and we're still being seen, you know, in the way that we're supposed to be seen.
Yeah, and like I said, you know, you're gonna potentially get pushback from management. And when I say that Kansas City was a whole nother level of racism, I mean the viewership there is very, you get a nice mix of very Southern beliefs in there. And you might not change those minds, but at least you're putting the content out, right? You are putting the content out, you are representing all aspects of your market when you do that. And, you know, you, like I said, you're just doing the best that you can. And it is frustrating to not see that change overnight, especially if you're one of those people that just want to take on the world and want to change everything. You might not see it, but you can lay your head down at night and be able to sleep, because you know that you've done the best that you can.
Right.
It reminds me when you were talking about representation, Shaniece, and you were talking about what it would be like to have an episode where, yeah, it is highlighting all Black voices and Black stories. And Breland, when you're talking about dealing with viewership, I remember an interesting quotation that was said to RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, about the Supreme Court. And someone said, well, how many voices of women would you want on the Supreme Court? And she said 9. And they were shocking, and people were grasping their pearls. And why in the world would she say that? She goes, because for over 200 years, it's always been men. And no one blinked at all for 200 years when it was all men. But then to say 9 women, and then suddenly it's like, whoa, where are you going with that one? And so I think it shows we still have an amazingly long way to go. But I think that you are clearly changing the world in an incredibly positive way toward making sure that more inclusive and diverse voices are indeed part of the conversation. It's a dream to watch. It really is. So let's talk about it from a personal perspective. Several students are going to be out there looking for that dream company, that dream organization. Some of the students know that my first job out wasn't exactly the best, but it paid the bills. I was a master in the janitorial services for public, how shall I put this? Comforts, which is a nice way of saying, and in fact, we were called the comfort crew, which sounds lovely. My job was to clean public toilets in a public restroom. That was my job. And it wasn't exactly what I was looking for in a dream employer for a variety of different reasons. When you are considering a dream employer, what do you look for? What is the most important thing in an organization that you personally look for, or that you could tell students that they could consider to look for? Why don't we start first with Breland on that one? Something that
Um,
stands out that you say, okay, that's what I'm looking for.
yeah, I mean, just a disclaimer, you're not going to get your dream organization for quite some time. That's just the nature of it. And you can't pick and choose because one thing or two things or what have you is not to your liking. You go in, you get your experience, you get out next when your contract's over, you go somewhere else and you keep building until you can have that luxury of picking where you would like to go. This is the first time I was able to pick where I would want to go. And it just so happened to be my home market. So I'm fine with that. Perfectly fine. But, you know, I really want somebody who not only values my work, but values me as an employee and an individual. And Fox is so great at that. You know, they check in, hey, how are you doing? They are very supportive of me as a human being and as a person, but they're also really supportive of me in my work. And I think they started to notice after, you know, the first 10 months of me being here, we can use her in other aspects and maybe she'd like an extra challenge. And they put me on a lifestyle show. I'm still doing sports, but they gave me the 215, which I had never done. And I was completely nervous, but they just want me to continue growing, even though I am in the place that I've always wanted to be. They still think it's important to continue to throw me challenges and make sure that I continue to grow, even though I might not necessarily be looking to move that market level anymore. So I think that is what I always look for, just somebody who values you as an employee and values your work and knows that you do a good job on air, but also that you know, they value you off air as well and just challenge you and want to make you better, because if you're better, then obviously they're better. But a lot of places, unfortunately, don't necessarily see it that way and put the work in to grow their talent the way that they should.
What are your thoughts, Shaniece?
Yes. So for me, I remember when I first got here, I was like trying to take on any job. And I quickly realized like it was good that I did that, because I realized what I didn't want to do and what I wanted to do. Like I was like I did one reality show, and after the first week I was like, I ain't never doing this again. They're a bunch of liars. And then they saw I was building relationships with the talent, and then they were like, oh, what did Drea say about this person? What did I said, I'm not getting in this. This isn't for me. And so after that, I was like, I need to, the next job or show that I work on, I need to make sure that I'm fulfilled and that I love what they represent and the stuff that they're putting out there. And like, with NBC, like I love their mission. It's fun. I love all the different, we got Peacock, and then, we get free Universal tickets, so I was like, I love the company as a whole. And then something else that I learned too is, they have a mental health, situation that, for employees. And this is the first company that I worked for that has that and encourages us to, utilize the resources, in that area. And that actually helped me because, I was always like, oh, should I go to therapy XYZ? And then when they, they do check-ins and stuff, and they were like, hey, just a reminder, check out our mental health resources. It's free to employees and blah, blah, blah. And then I started, going to therapy, and that has really helped me. At first, a lot of people, especially in this industry, they kind of look at it as, oh, like you're weak or what have you, but it actually is great. It makes me, think better and all of that. And, I'm really open about it. And I love that, our company encourages that, and so if I leave this job, the next thing that I'm going to make sure that the company has is those resources as well. And, because that shows that they care about their employees.
I want to say something on that relates to both of you. First, Shaniece, I know that a number of students have brought mental health concerns to the attention of those in the university, and how important it is for us to focus on mental health needs, and that we need to openly discuss mental health needs more. I think that that's absolutely spot on. And Breland, I'm really glad that you noted your first job out, probably not your dream job. And, it's just so sometimes you got to tamp down those expectations, because it's just not going to be necessarily what you think it's going to be. it may
and
not be the highest paying.
slight on them. Yeah, no slight on them. It's just, you don't go from getting your degree to ESPN or to Fox 29 overnight.
Right.
It takes a long time to get from A to B, but you'll get there if you work hard enough.
Can I say something real quick?
Absolutely.
The first week that I was here, it obviously wasn't going well. And I remember I called my boyfriend that I met at Temple. I was like, it's not what it's cracked up to be. I gotta leave here, otherwise I'm gonna be on Hollywood Boulevard stripping, blah blah blah. Like I was, I was like, this ain't it. But I'm happy I'm still here. It worked out.
You're gonna be on Hollywood Boulevard.
Yeah, I was like, I need to make money now.
The struggle is real. It's all I can say. It's real. Now, I'm looking back at your time at Klein. I'd like to take us a quick trip back in the wonderful time machine before we open it up for questions from the audience. So looking back at your time at Klein, it's a two-part question. You are greatly involved in so many things where you were part of the college. Question becomes why? And second, let's go to the very, very beginning of when you set foot on campus. So you just got done with high school. If you went to prom, the memories of that might still be in your mind. You have just, quote unquote, landed in the middle of campus. You have a choice on getting involved in things. You're not really sure. First, let's talk about the involvement issue. And second, what would you say to that 18-year-old person who just showed up outside of Annenberg Hall or is walking down Leocoris Walk or not sure what Leocoris Walk is or how to say it? Because let's face it, none of us really seem to know. And what would you say to that person, and what advice would you give as far as involvement? Open up to either of you who wants to begin.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Breland.
Yeah.
All right, fine. So I was involved in, oh my gosh, everything. Probably a little too much, I think, looking back. But I've always been a person who's just so afraid of failure, and I had so many people tell me that this was not. You're never gonna make it on TV. Are you kidding me? Like high school teachers trying to tell me that this was not a good career plan. I should think of something a little more stable. That just wasn't an option for me, but that also caused a lot of anxiety. I'm an anxious person to begin with, but that caused a lot of anxiety as I stepped foot on campus of, is this actually going to happen for me? And as the closer I got to May of 2014, my graduation date, there was, and I didn't, you're not going to leave communications 9 out of 10 times with a job in your hand. It takes a little bit of time, especially in TV. You got to send out reels and stuff. And because all of my friends in other majors already had jobs, I was such an anxious mess the entire time, just trying to figure out, did I make the right decision? And I think if I would stumble upon my 18-year-old self again, I would just tell her to calm down. Like, it's going to be okay. You are putting the work in. You are involved in everything. Like I was Hooter the Owl. I was the communications. You didn't know that? Mm-hmm. It's all over my bio. Yes, I was Hooter all 4 years of school. We can get into that later if you guys have questions. But I was Hooter. I was doing other things with the athletics department. I was working in the Office of Sustainability as their communications assistant and was helping with their athletic greening efforts. I was involved in, Owl Sports Update, and I was doing Temple News for a little bit before I decided to focus fully on Owl Sports. And there were so many different facets of my life that, looking back, of course I was able to handle the real world because I was spinning at 3,000 miles an hour in school. I would do it all over again, by the way. I had a great time and I had a perfect work-life balance. I was very much a frequenter of Maxie's. So don't worry, I had a social life. But I just think, enjoy the ride because it is so short. It goes by so quickly. And a lot of times I feel like I was too caught up in trying to succeed and looking 5, 10, 20 years ahead that I wasn't focused on where my feet were at the time. And if I could go back just for one day, I would. I don't know if I could hang with my 20-year-old, 21-year-old self again, but I would definitely go back just for a day if I had the opportunity.
No, I was thinking I knew that you had been Hooter, but it just dawned on me. You would have been Hooter, I think, when I met Hooter several times. It's possible our younger selves met.
Probably.
Because which is freaking me out right now on so many different ways.
There's a lot of times now that I'm back here and that people say, oh, have we met before? I said, you might have met me, or you might, as like an actual human being, or you might have met me as an owl. I'm not entirely sure. So here, just in case, like here I am again as a real person.
I am positive that during those years, I met with Hooter numerous times. So we might have been hanging out when you were in your alternative form of Hooter the Owl. That's just classic. Shaniece, what would you say looking back?
Looking back, I remember definitely my first year, I was all about, I got to stick to the script. I need to just pick one thing and focus on that. And I'm happy that I broke out of that because I was able to figure out other things that I was good at. Which again, I'm happy that Temple really pushes you to, get yourself involved in all these different activities. And that's really what built my all these great friendships that I still have today. Me doing all these different things, and I was on the dance team and all of that. I was able to meet people from other schools at Temple and, have really solid relationships with them. And then, there's something that I think it was Issa Rae that said it, where it's like, people are always about try to network up. And it's like, no, network, with your peers, because, we're all going to be great, especially if we're coming from Temple, and somewhere or another, we'll be able to help each other or, put each other on lookout, within our respective careers. And so I am happy that though being involved in, so many different things allowed me to continue to build my network and make great friends. Like my greatest friends in my life right now are the people that I met at Temple. I can't really say that much about, high school or middle school, what I'm saying? But the Temple people, because we've been through it. We experienced something together in the city. Like, it's beautiful, I get so excited just to see my Temple people, even I'm sorry, even when I on social media, when someone follows me and the first thing they say is like, I'm an owl too. I'm like, oh my God, because that's instant family, it's a special connection versus somebody sliding in my DM saying, hey, can you put me on, I'm always gonna prioritize the Temple people because I know how much it meant to me and how much it really, set the foundation for my career and my life moving forward. So, yeah.
And you
so
hit the nail on the
inspiring.
head too. You hit the nail on the head too. I will say, I know that I made a joke about me being a frequenter of Maxie's, but those same people that I was out with and having a good time with, one of them ended up, number one, she's still my best friend, but one of them ended up getting me my first job. And I turned around and got somebody else their first job. And so on and so on and so on and so on and so on. And they're still here. One of those people who I was very much at Max's with all the time, Ross DeMatte, just got a job at CBS 3. So we're still all together and we are all absolutely still networking and helping each other out. And as silly and dumb as that sounds, to just have a social life, it is so important because, as Shaniece said, that networking is so key. And you never know who's going to be where. I have people who work at, Fox Sports, ESPN. I'm here. Some other people here I know from back, in the day. So it's really important to also just form those friendships with your friends and your peers that you're with in class.
I'm so thankful for your open, honest feedback and for being so utterly real and authentic self, being on full display for everyone to be able to see. I thank you so much as the student's professor, as a colleague at Temple, as a fellow alumnus 2019, and part of our larger collective whole family that is the Temple experience. I want to be very mindful. Go ahead, Shaniece. Yeah, by all means.
Can I add one more thing? Another thing I would tell my 18-year-old self is start saving money, because I wasn't saving money. And I just assumed, maybe because of me watching TV and movies, but I just assumed after I graduated that my family was going to have some jackpot of money for me, to, live my life, and I had zero in the bank account. So, yeah, save money. Start saving money.
When I graduated, I was counting the extra amount of credit that I had on my credit cards as income. So don't do that. Financial literacy and awareness is a very, very good thing. I want to be very mindful of your time. And I know we said we're going to close at 12:15. I want to see if you'll be willing to take some questions from students.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to go basically, whoever puts their hand up first. I got Becca, Allie, and Nicole in that order. Becca, why don't you begin with questions?
Okay, so first, thank you for coming. Also, there's like construction going on. I'm so sorry. Temple. So my question is, okay, so when I was younger, I always kind of wanted to be in entertainment. That's sort of like shifted now for me, but so as women in the entertainment business, do you ever feel like your time is sort of fleeting? And I know that like older women have a harder time as you get older being in media and getting jobs or being booked for things. So my question is, do you ever feel like that? And then also, how do we combat that as like a society?
For me, I don't, I think we're going to be fine because, as I'm like doing segments and everything, it's really about like you just being solid in who you are, and the opportunities will present itself, like I know like there's certain jobs where it's like, oh yeah, we're just going to continue to have young talent on XYZ, but it's like, yeah, that's cool, but you can't axe out other people that have experience and that are actual, have years of their expertise in whatever they're, trying to focus on, So I think like at least with, my show, we highlight a range of different people, of different women in different age groups, and they are solid in, whatever it is that they're, pitching out. So to me, that gives me hope. Like, okay, like I still have longevity even after, I'm out of my 30s or 40, whatever it is, because, they're still staying true to themselves and they're getting opportunities based off of that. Is that make sense? Sorry.
I'd agree. And I think, when you look at the industry now, it's a whole different ballgame than it was a decade ago. And you're seeing older, more seasoned, veteran reporters have that staying power. And I'm not too worried. I'll also just cross that bridge when I get there. I can't borrow worries, right?
Like that.
I can't be borrowing worries. So that's for another day. But I think just looking around, there's enough seasoned reporters on ESPN and even locally that I think I'll be fine.
That's very hopeful. Thank you. Allie, I think your question's up next.
Yeah, so I know Becca already said this, but thank you again for like taking the time to like come and speak for us. I don't know, I appreciate it. But this might be more of a question for Breland and Shaniece, but like if both of you have stuff to add, like that's absolutely like I'd love to, hear from both of you. I personally like want to go into like, some form of like sports journalism as well. Probably like writing. I don't really want to be on TV, but when you were talking about getting involved so much while at Temple, were there certain things that like you either wish you had done that you hadn't done, or that like you wish that you prioritized over other things that you got into because like it might have made, like the opportunities you had like after graduation, like I guess more like abundant, or you just like might have felt like you would have like gained more experience, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. The answer is no, I wouldn't change anything. But if I had to pick something, I took an internship, and this is, I think, a really big lesson for everybody. I took an internship with the Flyers, and this is no knock on the Flyers. It wasn't the correct internship, and I wish the person who interviewed me took a deeper look at my resume and realized that it wasn't a good fit. I was on like the Fun Patrol or game presentation, and I had worked in sports since I was 15. I started mascotting for the Reading Phillies and the Reading Royals, and I was also doing game pres for them the entire time. And so why was I going to take an introduction to game presentation internship after my resume says I've been doing that job essentially for 8 years before I even stepped in there. So that was, it was, I just felt that it wasn't my fault. It wasn't necessarily their fault. It just was the wrong internship for me. But I thought getting an internship with the Flyers was going to just make or break. And I actually had a better experience at my small market radio station in Reading, Pennsylvania than I did at the Flyers. I learned a lot more because it was hands-on. So I think what I'm trying to get at is don't necessarily shy away from smaller opportunities, because you might learn a ton more than you ever would folding t-shirts for 2 hours at the Flyers. I learned nothing there. And again, no knock on them. It just wasn't the correct fit for me. And I was cutting commercials. I learned how to do Audacity, all sorts of really cool things at my small market little radio station. So that is, I think, the biggest piece of advice that I would give is just to not shy away from smaller, less flashier opportunities because you think it's not going to catch the eye of somebody on their resume. It will.
Excellent advice. Can I add on to that something too that I think that you noted? A big name does not always equal a big experience.
Mm-hmm.
If you are working in a big name corporation, it may look great until you realize that you're going to be folding shirts for hours. You can only present I folded shirts for hours in so many ways on your resume. And after the big name, the lights dim, what you got left? A bunch of folded shirts. So very fair point, very fair point. Nicole, I think you've got our last question.
So thank you for coming in and talking to us. You guys are so inspiring. So my question was, after you graduated, I personally I'm interested in the television industry and the journalism part of it. So my question is after you graduated, what was the hardest concept for you right after you graduated to get to where you are now, if that makes sense?
Shooting. Definitely. I thought, I just want to do the talent section of this. I don't care about editing. I hate editing. It sucks. Not Final Cut and I were enemies the entire time I was at Temple. The tech center hated that place. Because every single time I was at the tech center, that meant I was working on Final Cut. And it was a trouble.
Right.
But do it. Because it will help you in so many ways. And I saw people who had no experience in Final Cut and no experience shooting whatsoever, really, really struggling. And that's when I was like, wow, I hated this the entire time. And I really resented it, but I'm really glad that I have that experience. So definitely all of those things that you find yourself weak at, or something that you really just don't like to do because it's time consuming or just not what you're gifted at naturally, work on those things while you're in school, because that's the number one thing I wish I would have done. I would have spent more time teaching myself how to shoot, teaching myself how to edit, doing those things, because then I had to go and learn it in the real world, which is fine. It all worked out anyway, but take the time to really focus on the things that you don't like to do and you're not naturally gifted at.
How do you advise someone having this sense of imposter syndrome? I'm not good at it. I'll never be good at it. I've heard so many people say, I feel like an imposter in my own skin. And I definitely feel like an imposter in some of these classes when I look around and there's all these people that are doing this and they got their lives figured out. And I'm sitting here just going who am I? What would you suggest to that?
I'm sorry, Shaniece. I'm just taking this.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
A mentor of mine one time, my first job, my news director at, my second market, Rochester, New York, he pulled me in and he's like, what are you doing? I said, what do you mean what I'm doing? I said, you're trying to be, who are you trying to be? You are a journalist. You know that, right? I hired you. I didn't hire whoever you're impersonating, whatever this thing is that you're doing, stop it and just be yourself. You are more than capable of being here. And if you weren't more than capable of being here, I wouldn't have hired you. He was also the first person I asked him, do you want me to straighten my hair? And he's like, how does it grow out of your head? Wear it the way it grows out of your head, the way God gave it to you. Like, he was very instrumental in having me embrace my authentic self and breaking out of that imposter syndrome. And I still feel it a lot, when you walk into a room and it's all white men and you're the only young woman that's sitting there in a press conference and, they're all shouting over each other. You're trying to get a word in edgewise. You definitely feel that sense of, do I belong? Do they look at me sideways? But I do belong, because Fox 29 thought I was more than capable of being here. And I'm sure they had several hundred choices of people to put in the position, and they put me here. So it's really difficult to get out of your own head. But I think just reminding yourself that somebody else, not you, thought you were more than capable of occupying the space that you are now. And just because you're not like everybody else doesn't mean you're not qualified to be there.
Yes, I second that too, because sometimes, like, in the beginning, when I first got here, I was thinking about that a lot. Like, well, am I supposed to be here? Like, am I deserving? Blah, blah, blah. And, that's kind of died down, but I do get hints of it here and there popping up, because it's, especially when it's like the bigger opportunities, and knowing that, like, I'm not a Mario Lopez or anything like that, but like for example, Mariah Carey, like, they were like, hey, Shaniece, you're going to interview Mariah tomorrow. And I was like, me? Are you sure? What? Like, I still get like that, but I'm just like, they wouldn't have thrown it at me if they didn't think that I was going to deliver and handle it, and handle her, so I got to keep reminding myself about that too. But yeah, there's still, it still bubbles up, here and there. But, at the end of the day, it's like, we're all here for a reason. We're on assignment at where we're at, because God gave us the tools to achieve, and give it our all, and whatever it is that's thrown at us.
Such an inspirational thought. And speaking of throwing things at you, I have to ask a question. And by all means, please feel free to say no. Would you be willing to share your email contact or a contact method if students have additional questions with you?
Mine's public, so I have no choice. Y'all can find me anyway. No, absolutely. You guys can connect with me. I'm on Twitter. I am also, you can find my email on the Fox 29 contact page. So totally fine.
Excellent. And Shaniece, is the same true for you?
Yes, yeah. I'll send you my email address. And I'm on social media, Superwoman, Superfly. I'm a nerd, so
I am so thrilled, but I will tell you, we'll probably go through email if that's okay. We will put out your email address in an announcement to class, and that'll go just to the class that's here. If that's all right with you. Is that okay with everyone?
Sure.
All right. You get ready to get some messages, I have a feeling. So I hope that's all right.
That's okay.
I want to thank our guests tremendously and say adieu and farewell and congratulations on your award. I think it is fantastic. And I think you are amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. Students, if you can linger for my class just for a few seconds afterward as we say goodbye to our guests, and share the love in the chat and give them some love and emojis. I want to thank you so much. You are an inspiration to me. You are an inspiration to other people. You are an inspiration to women. You are an inspiration to people of color. And you are an inspiration to us as fellow Temple Owls. So thank you so much for taking the time with us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys. You guys are awesome. What a fun class.
Yeah,
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to host you. We'll see you again soon, hopefully. See you.
Bye.
Bye, Breland. Bye, Shaniece.
Thank you.
Thank you.